The Costa Concordia, longer than the Titanic, with twice as many decks. One of the world's most luxurious cruise ships. On the night of January 13th, 2012, near Italy's Tuscan coast, she becomes the largest passenger shipwreck in history. 30 people are dead, 2 are still missing. Now, the world's best marine salvage team faces mission impossible. They'll only have one chance to raise the massive ship that is teetering precariously over a deep-sea drop-off. Senior salvage master Nick Sloan is in charge of it all.
Captain Nick?
Yeah, you have to live and die by your decisions.
Will Sloan and his team manage to right the ship without triggering an environmental disaster? Will the missing victims be found? This girl survived, but her mother is among the missing. Now, she shares her mother's last known moments for the first time with her father.
We heard the alarm to abandon ship. We all held hands. Then we went to the lifeboat deck.
Through the eyes of survivors and the skills of the engineers, this is the untold story of raising the Costa Concordia. p.m., January 13, 2012. The Costa Concordia is just 3 hours into her weekly cruise around the Mediterranean. The huge vessel powers toward the Italian island of Giglio at a speed of 16 knots. On board, the Concordia's 4,200 passengers and crew enjoy the floating pleasure palace. They can choose from one of her 5 restaurants or enjoy a drink in any of her 13 bars. Bingo is running on deck 5. Stefania Vincenzi, her mother Maria Grazia, and a friend Luisa Versi sit down to dinner in the Milano restaurant on deck 3.
It was a beautiful evening. My mother was celebrating her 50th birthday.
Exquisite meals flow out of the ship's kitchens with factory-line precision. But this typical evening of indulgence is about to be cut short. While the passengers eat, the ship strays dangerously close to shore, headed straight for a rocky outcrop.
A loud screeching like...
And then a huge crash and almost like an explosion.
It sounded like a freight train and that metal was just rubbing up against metal.
And then the ship began to list quite heavily. Everything is sliding off the tables, people are screaming.
The lights went out.
And the lights went out.
And that really caused panic. Screaming and running and falling. Everyone's trying to run out the main door.
The largest Italian cruise ship ever designed is going down. Stefania Vincenzi remembers every minute of that night.
We stayed seated at our table because the people were panicked. We preferred to stay calm and stay seated. Also because the ship was already tilting. The waitress for our table began to cry. she collapsed. My mother consoled her and told her everything would be okay. She had a very reassuring gaze, especially for me. Those were the only eyes that were able to calm me down. So I wasn't agitated at all that evening.
Thousands of tons of seawater flood the engine room, and the great ship loses power. It's chaos. It's terrifying. And within minutes, fear and confusion turn to mass panic.
Il bambino qua, piccolino! Andiamo,
There were people pushing and crushing people. When you have these situations of danger, unfortunately the crowds are uncontainable.
A series of horn blasts or alarms is the international signal to abandon ship.
The alarm went off to abandon ship. Everyone was talking, saying maybe it's just shallow water, maybe the ship will stabilize. Instead, we began to hear the alarms. Mama said that there must be 7 blasts, with the last one long. Everything fell silent, and we started counting the blasts. We heard the 7th alarm. It had a prolonged blast. We looked into each other's eyes and said, here we go.
When they finally lowered us down, they still
had trouble.
They still had trouble releasing us. And at this point, you have to remember the ship is leaning over us. You have this huge structure just leaning over you, and if you can't release your lifeboat, you know, you're gonna have to...
It would have come down upon us.
Stefania and her mother get in line for a lifeboat on deck 4, but it fills up before they can board. Her mother, Maria, announces she's returning to their cabin 2 decks below.
Mama wanted to get a life jacket because it was cold and because her friend Luisa didn't know how to swim.
If we looked up, we see the ship was on this angle, and there's all people on the bow of the ship yelling, help, help.
Infrared footage from the rescue helicopters shows the escape ladder at the stern, and some of the survivors swimming the 20 yards to shore. Stefania does as her mother tells her and boards another lifeboat.
I tried to call my mother to see where she was. She said that she was on a lifeboat and that she was arriving. I said, when you arrive, call me and tell me what part of the port you're in. But that call never came.
I think we collided with an island. The whole city is here to greet us, yeah.
Many who reach shore wait for news of their loved ones. The tiny island town is flooded with thousands of desperate refugees from the disaster.
This is no joke. Oh my goodness.
Locals become heroes that night.
Buonasera, signor.
Families open their homes and hearts to strangers. Many passengers make their way to the church.
Here's where those people are. Also here, there were people with their life jackets. And they were waiting for someone to do something. I came and opened the church, and they started to come in. Everyone was here. And here. The guy who was soaking wet was sitting here. There were the children who arrived in the beginning, who were cold.
Those still on board the doomed ship could see the shore, creating a false sense of security.
You could just jump off and swim.
At 11 p.m., Stefania's mother, Maria, calls her husband, but he doesn't hear the phone. Maria calls a family friend next, who hears Luisa cry, "I don't know how to swim. Help me."
My mother said, "Don't worry, you can hold on to me. I will take care of you." And then he heard, "We're sliding into the water," and a splash as if the phone was falling into the sea.
The body of Maria's friend, Luisa, would later be found with other victims. But Stefania's mother is never heard from again, and her fate is a mystery. In the morning, the Costa Concordia lies on her side near Porto Giglio. The Coast Guard and Fire Rescue start searching for anyone still aboard. A local restaurant owner displays the first photo of the rescue that flashed around the world.
This photo was requested by the firemen who went to recover the bodies.
30 people will be confirmed dead, with 2 still missing. Stefania's mother and a young waiter from India, Russell Ribello. Relatives fear the worst, but there can't be closure until the wreck is righted and the submerged decks are completely searched. Almost 2 years later, the 114,000-ton ship, with another 60,000 tons of contents, is collapsing from its own weight. It has become an environmental hazard, threatening the entire coastline. The Costa Concordia must be removed. If it was an empty shell, the salvage crew could simply cut her up. But because the ship is packed with personal effects and possibly the remains of 2 people, that isn't an option. There's only one plan: pull the Concordia upright and tow her away. But the great ship is perched on top of 2 undersea granite pinnacles. One wrong move will twist her in 2 or send her spinning into the abyss. But they have to try. After more than a year of research, experts came to a shocking conclusion. It's now or never. The Concordia may not survive another winter intact. She's an environmental time bomb.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you got a crew change in 10, 15 minutes.
Senior salvage master Nick Sloan has tackled some of the world's toughest marine fixes, like huge oil tankers snapped in half by waves off of South Africa's coast.
You can, depending on the weather, that looks more sheltered down aft.
But this one is beyond compare.
Then when you stand on board and you just see how absolutely big it is, and you really realize what you got yourself into. 2 things make it particularly difficult. One is the size of the ship, and then the location. So if you look at Giglio, the location where she sat on the 2 reefs, and you combine the 2 assets together, it's just off the scale. Okay, let's get ready for deck.
These guys are a rare breed. They can mobilize within hours, ready to attack sudden disasters. Now, they're taking on the most challenging wreck removal ever attempted. Righting the Concordia will require nearly 500 experts from 24 nations. Once upright, she will be refloated and towed to a shipyard in July.
We have one of the largest salvage teams ever put together in history. It's divers, welders, engineers, fabricators, mariners, just everything you can think of. It's huge.
Nick Sloan and his team have put 18 months of backbreaking work and could spend as much as $800 million on the gamble that they can pry the great ship off the rocks. They'll get only one shot to do it right. Salvage master Nick Sloan is about to attempt an engineering miracle, raising the Costa Concordia from its watery grave. It's called the parbuckling project. Parbuckling is a method used to retrieve a sunken vessel by using slings and weight to roll her. On one side, hydraulic jacks will keep her from sliding down, while powerful jacks on the opposite side rotate her upright.
You can't really go into a hardware store and say, I want one Costa Concordia parbuckling kit, because they wouldn't really know what you need. So everything that we have has been designed and built by the team.
But the process has never been applied to a passenger ship as large as Concordia. The preparation alone is extraordinary. First, the team fills in beneath her sagging midsection with 20,000 tons of giant cement bags to support her tremendous weight. The bags also level the sloping seafloor and will help distribute the massive forces on the ship. Then, they weld 10-story ballast tanks called sponsons on her exposed side. These will be filled with water during the latter stage of the parbuckle to assist the rotation, and then emptied to add buoyancy and to control her touchdown. Next, they encircle her with hydraulic jacks, capable of shifting over 200,000 tons of dead weight upright. Nick Sloan and his team are as ready as they can be.
How do you feel?
Excited. Yeah, we're looking forward to getting her upright. It's been a long 18 months, and it's about time that we got her up.
The stakes are high for the engineers and the locals. A day before it's a go, the people of Giglio call in some help from above. Local churches pray for success.
In particular, we ask him to guide the hand of those who are carrying out the recovery of the ship.
It's a high-risk operation. The wreck is so fragile that Sloan has only one shot to get it right. If the ship breaks apart, the two missing victims might never be found, and the coast will be hopelessly polluted. An engineering project this size requires attention to every minute detail. Sloan tested his approach to righting the Concordia through computer simulations. But at first, all this advanced technology brought bad news. Just pulling the ship up, as is, would end in disaster.
It looks like a bad car crash in the model. And then it told us the bow and the stern would fall off if we didn't do corrective action.
The original simulations identified two critical challenges: First, the bow, overhanging the support platforms by nearly a football field, could collapse and break off.
In the bow areas was far too deep, so the water depth just goes all the way down to 80, 100 meters. We could not build a platform there.
So they created a buoyant neck brace to support the bow and spine of the ship.
And it's like a casualty with a spinal injury on the ground. You hold the neck and you just rotate them slowly to minimize any twist in the spine.
It all comes down to weight and power. But when one problem is solved, another appears. The second challenge is impossible to completely troubleshoot in advance. Nick knows the Concordia is lodged on rocks that punched through her hull. What he can't know is how tightly those rocks might hold her to the sea floor as they attempt the lift.
The breakout force depends on the profile of the rock. So if the rock is nice and smooth, we can break it off without too much friction. But if they have a knuckle which is trapped inside on the side shell, then you have to break it and tear it off that.
If they manage to pull Concordia free from that rocky grip, the next problem is the sheer weight of the wreck. The ship sank with unused food and supplies for all 4,200 people on board. Sloan must factor all of this weight, along with that of the actual ship, into the force required to raise her from the sea floor.
The moment she lifts up, all the weight gets transferred onto the starboard bilge keel, and that weight wants to crush the ship. It is not designed to take that sort of load. With all the internal furniture, the dining rooms, everything's fallen down to the lower side and absorbed water. All the passengers' hand luggage, carpets, mattresses, everything's absorbed water and fallen over to the starboard side of the shell. So that makes it more difficult because we're not sure exactly where the center of gravity is.
Nick and his team must plan for both known and unforeseeable trouble. They designed a steel platform to be the Concordia's new level resting site, hoping to prevent the ship from sliding into the abyss. Nick believes this will keep the middle of the wreck, her weakest point, from collapsing during the rotation. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, with high-resolution cameras have been Nick's eyes during the installation of the platform. Tomorrow, they'll provide real-time underwater monitoring during the parbuckling. The moment of truth is just hours away. Will Nick Sloan's grand and extreme plan for raising the Concordia succeed? Or will the fragile wreck break in two, creating an environmental disaster? Since the wreck of the Costa Concordia in January 2012, the tiny island of Giglio off Italy's Tuscan coast has been transformed into a hub of engineering muscle. Porto Giglio's population of 500 has doubled due to the huge salvage team that works around the clock. There's activity in the harbor day and night. Next to the battered and broken Concordia is a floating dormitory where most of the hundreds of workers live. The 18 months of effort will culminate in the ultimate test. In just 24 hours, parbuckle succeeds, then life will slowly return to normal on the sleepy Italian island. But if the ship breaks apart, this part of the Mediterranean will be an environmental disaster zone. The Concordia already shows signs of disintegration, so the salvage crew knows it's now or never. Nick heads out for one final check before tomorrow's big event. The ballast tanks have been precisely adjusted to control the water intake and outflow critical in the operation. Computers that control the holdback jacks have been tested. "22 massive chains and the steel cables that encircle the wreck are securely in place. And the powerful hydraulic jacks on the seaward side are ready. All of the engineering machinery is poised for action.
So Nick, are we ready?
We're ready.
Nick Sloan has the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he doesn't let it show.
No, final checks are going to take up the attention this evening and then get ready for the morning. Start with a couple.
How do you feel?
Oh, good. Very good. Very confident.
Great.
Media from around the world have descended on the narrow streets of Giglio for the big event.
Lo sversamento più significativo è...
What is your biggest nightmare?
Mostly the weather.
Sloan has reason to worry because offshore it's getting ugly quickly. Violent electrical storms are common in the Mediterranean during autumn, and this one looks menacing. At 5:45 a.m., the raising of the Costa Concordia is set to start. But the rain and lightning have knocked out the entire electronic system. One of the control panels has short-circuited. These electronics are the only way Nick can control the jacks and buoyancy tanks. The disaster threatens to delay or even end the project before it begins. But Sloan is a meticulous planner. His team has backup ready to install. While the crew makes the switch, a barge moves the portable control room into place. Nick Sloan heads out to take command. Swapping out the circuit boards has caused a 3-hour delay, but now they're ready. With a simple twirl of his hand, Nick signals, "Let's do it." It's 9 a.m. After millions of hours from hundreds of experts, the fate of the Concordia is now in the hands of 12 people.
We're going to go down to the touchdown point. Level Mark 2. Okay, can we synchronize our watches? 0859. What's your time? 0900 hours.
They will scrutinize every second of the parbuckle, but their ears are just as important as their eyes at this early stage. Underwater microphones will pick up the battered ship's sounds as the jacks start to lift her. A loud groan would be the first sign of trouble.
Presently at 2,200 and we're going up to about 2,500.
36 hydraulic jacks start to tighten the cables. Tons of pulling capacity go to work. The raising of Concordia begins. But while all eyes and ears in the command center are focused on the ship, another group back on shore is monitoring the progress in a different way, using technologies that can literally see into the ship.
These yellow elements are the jacks, and we can see they are a yellow color, meaning a higher temperature, so the parbuckling is start.
Dr. Nicola Casalli is a geology professor at the University of Florence.
We can move to the next installation.
His team rushed to the wreck site a mere 4 days after the accident, deploying high-end laser and infrared cameras. They've been monitoring it continuously every hour since. They're used to analyzing volcanoes, but their expertise will help ensure the parbuckle proceeds safely.
Here there is a three-dimensional laser scanner and a thermal
The lasers detect every movement of the wreck, and the data is sent to the Italian authorities and to Sloan. As the rotation puts extreme stress on the Concordia, they're able to see any deformation to the ship in real time.
The white elements is a point. For every of each points, we know exactly the topographical position.
They check 3 million points on the ship simultaneously. At first, progress is invisible to the naked eye. But a monumental force is rotating the Concordia's massive frame. Every member of the team is scouring the incoming data for any signs of trouble. If the wreck starts to twist or break apart, they may have only seconds to react. The jacks are straining to pull the ship off the rocks.
But until we actually see her lift, we won't know what that force is. So that's the unknown factor. The higher that gets, the more nervous we get. When we got up to 4,000 tons, 5,000 tons, 6,000 tons.
Then Nick sees a serious problem. With growing alarm, he realizes the jacks are already over 65% of their maximum power. They're at more than 6,500, and still the ship won't budge.
Channel 77.
For a heart-stopping moment, Nick fears the Concordia is permanently stuck on the rocks. Finally, at 6,800 tons, movement. The ship has pulled free.
People were pretty quiet there because we were, that was now on the more pessimistic side of where we were expecting to be. But at 6,800, the NC came up.
The university team on land confirms that the ship is slowly rotating. And just as important, all parts of the ship are moving together.
The rotation is going well because all the points show the same amount of displacement. So the ship is moving like a rigid body without internal deformation. Everything is going smooth.
Tourists and press hold a collective breath while unseen but powerful forces slowly raise the massive ship. But Sloan's team still has a long way to go before they are assured of success. The massive shipwreck could break apart at any time. In theory, everything has been taken into consideration. The weight of the ship, the 400,000 tons of water inside, even the force when that water runs out, and the friction from pulling up and off the rocks. Lasers show all is going as planned. If onlookers expect instant drama, they're disappointed. But Nick's team has to go slow and steady if they have any hope of keeping the ship intact. After an hour, the ship has rotated less than 1 degree.
We say 1 hour to break her off the rock, another 5.5 to 6 hours to get to where gravity takes over, 1 hour to drop her to the 10-degree level, and then another hour just to put her on the platforms as gently as possible.
I have new data from, we are 2.5 degrees now. They are proceeding very quickly. I give you the inch, say 35 inch, 10 inch per hour.
Thermal cameras and radar reveal that all of the steel cables are turning at exactly the same speed as they pull the Concordia. Now, the pace of the parbuckle increases to 2 degrees per hour, and the gruesome sea-logged side of the ship slowly emerges. The algae-darkened hull is exposed to air for the first time in almost 2 years. Just when success seems certain, Sloan's vital monitors suddenly go blank. Without the input from cameras throughout the ship, Nick's team is working blind. Sloan can't solve the problem, and he can't even see what's wrong.
Yeah, please can you request your ROV pilot?
The team launches a small camera drone to investigate. At this critical stage of the parbuckle, they must fix this problem or the salvage operation can't continue. The raising of the Costa Concordia has hit a snag, and it could be a fatal one. Critical monitors are down. The drone shows that steel cables have become twisted with the data lines. The operation can't continue unless they can get these vital monitors working. Sloan sends a crew out to the unstable wreck to fix the problem. The news is mixed. They can see and correct the problem, but it will cost the operation at least an hour. And the longer the ship is frozen in place, the greater danger it could break apart. Finally, they manage to restore the electronic feed. Nick hits restart.
Yeah, just confirm all personnel of the Concordia.
Yeah, not yet. The boat is still loading.
Okay, we're going up 10%.
For residents on shore, watching the Costa Concordia slowly emerge brings back the horror of the disaster. It could have been even worse. One local, Settimo Butelli, saw the Concordia barreling toward the island on January 13th, 2012. He describes how wind and currents swung the mortally wounded ship around and pushed it toward Giglio's harbor instead of out to sea.
It was a miracle because if the wind, instead of blowing from the east, it came from the south, the ship would have gone into open waters and they would all be dead.
For Stefania Vincenzi, the raising of the Concordia is a last hope to find her mother, who is missing and presumed dead. Stefania and her father Elio are still haunted by the events of that night. As they desperately sought a way off the ship, her mother decided to return to their cabin for a life jacket.
I said, no, you can't go to the cabin, but she continued to insist, so I grabbed her arm, and she said, I need to get a life jacket for Luisa because she doesn't know how to swim. When she went down the stairs, I looked at her, and she said, come on, I'll give you a kiss. I said, go, give me the kiss later. Mama turned to go down the steps and smiled, and she disappeared.
Stefania never saw her mother again. While they don't know exactly what happened to Maria, they suspect she became trapped when the ship tipped over.
Here's where people disembarked before us, and they were given blankets. The ship was still not completely inclined.
I never understood why there were no images of the last collapse of the boat when Mama died. How is it possible that no one filmed the moment? Plus, she knew how to swim well. She was a very good swimmer.
Possibly, I don't know. It could be that she was trapped, that she couldn't get out, and water came in.
Both she and her father hope for closure once the Concordia is upright, and divers can search for Maria. Night falls, but they must go on. The hull has been under extreme loads longer than planned, and structural failure is just around the corner. Under halogen work lights, a giant cave of shredded metal slowly emerges from the inky black water. Deck by deck, the corpse of the wreck slowly emerges throughout the long night. At 4 a.m., 19 long hours after he'd launched the effort, the Concordia is upright and secure on the underwater platforms. Ship's horns announce the victory to the waiting press and the residents of Giglio. The salvage master finally heads to shore.
With the rainstorm and everything we had the night before, there was some challenges. Electronics on board got wiped out. So, yeah, those things happen in salvage. So there's been no gas, there's been no pollution. She's completely upright.
How do you feel now, Nick?
A lot of relief.
Next step?
Well, we're going to have a beer tonight, or this morning. Okay.
Now, Nick, congratulations.
Okay, thanks, Brent.
You are the best.
The wrecked Concordia is now afloat, but the job isn't over. Police must now search for Maria Grazia Trecarichi and the young waiter Russell Rebello, whose bodies may still be trapped inside. Dawn reveals how much this once glorious luxury cruise ship has changed. In the Costa Concordia's glory days, a week-long Mediterranean cruise would cost several $100s or more. Now that the extent of her damage is revealed, it seems like a miracle that so many escaped that night. From deck 6 upward, the ship is water-free, but waterlogged. And 10 decks still remain underwater. While the salvage team stabilizes the great ship, the other tough work begins. The destroyed cruise ship is a crime scene. The cavernous wreck must be searched for remains of 2 people. A team of 80 divers begins a meticulous room-by-room search within the flooded ship.
In all rescue missions, the scene is in command. In the case of the Costa Concordia, in the beginning we were dealing with a surreal scene, never imagined by the workers and divers.
Finally, on day 14, a diver finds a body.
Once the diver entered the passageway to conduct an exploration of the ship, he found himself in very difficult conditions. On the starboard side, he identified the 31st victim.
The diver has found Maria Grazia. The exact details of what happened to her remain unclear, but water had swept Stefania's mother to a place on the ship far from her cabin.
She took the staircase toward the stern and arrived at the kitchen. Unfortunately, there, evidently the water arrived with great force and transported the body to where we found it.
Maria's husband and daughter finally have closure, but they're tormented by what they imagine to be her final moments.
There must have been that last second at the end when she thought, I am dying, and this leaves me with incredible anguish.
But Stefania feels that her mother is at peace.
Sono contenta che è tornata a casa.
I'm happy she's back home. She loved the sea so much, and in some way, the sea cradled her for 2 years now. It isn't something that made me hate the sea. I will continue to love the sea. It reminds me of her.
The police divers still hope to find Russell Rebello, but so far, he remains missing. With the Concordia upright again, the most dangerous part of the operation is over.
Good day, how are you?
But the salvage team must push forward before winter arrives in full force.
You didn't realize how big it was until it actually got turned over, I don't think.
There's still two-thirds are still underneath.
I can't imagine that.
More than 10 stories underneath there.
Yeah.
The aft and back, 2 minutes, just to the stern and back.
The wreck is still unstable, so they will proceed with caution.
So it's almost about there, just by the L or the O, that whole frame.
Just take that off, all the way up.
All the way up.
Nick plans to reinforce the damaged sections and add 19 more floats before they attempt to tow her away. By July 2014, Deck 3 will be at water level, and 6 decks will remain underwater.
So almost back to where that red paint is, just where the buckle's up.
Then we go along here.
So we've got some major cracks that have come up from the power buckling operation.
The parbuckle has exposed new holes in the hull, And there's more back-breaking work ahead to ready the ship for her slow tug crawl to her final dock in the summer, where she'll be broken up for scrap.
We'll clean up all the areas that you see, the car crash, the dimples, get back to the structure of the ship, and she'll be ready for spring to start adding sponsons and then do the refloat. You know, by the time she's refloated and delivered, will be time to go home.
Soon, the island's view will be restored. But even after the Concordia is gone, no one will ever forget the disaster and the 32 who died. The raising of the Costa Concordia, after 2 years and millions of man-hours, remains a testament to the courage of the survivors, the skill of the salvage crew, and the legacy of a once great cruise ship.